Shabbat Shalom. As biblical stories go, so far in the Torah, all these stories have been really nice. But now it's time to create a Jewish society with our ancestors having come out of Egypt and have been given the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai. Now they must forge a civil society in which to live. This portion of Mishpatim, this week's Torah portion, is also referred to as Sefer HaBrit, the Book of the Covenant. It's the first body of Torah legislation, and it's mostly concerned with how Israelite society should function. There's all kinds of laws in this portion. In fact, 53 commandments. It talks about Hebrew slaves and how they have to be freed in the 7th year of their bondage, or in their servitude, I should say, because their servitude was different than the kind of bondage and slavery our ancestors experienced in Egypt. It talks about civil penalties if somebody injures another person. It talks about acting justly and kindly towards strangers, as well as the orphan and the widow. The laws deal with how to return lost property to others, even if those others are your own enemy. How to help animals under a burden and when they struggle. There's even laws about kashrut. So this portion sets up laws in which the Israelites will be able to live in society. At the beginning of his commentary on this week's portion of Mishpatim, the great Torah commentator Rashi asks why this enumeration of laws by which the Israelites will live from now on should follow the instructions of how to build an altar, which were given in last week's Torah portion of Yitro, at the very end of it. His proposed answer is that it informs you that the Sanhedrin, the Israelite high court, will be placed by the altar, next to the altar. In other words, there within the temple precinct. Justice and religious practice are presented in unity, if you will, combined in this new way of life that's been set before the people Israel by God through these laws. In a sense, justice and law become the religion, so inseparable that dedication to social justice and the rule of law are hallmarks of Jewish identity to this day. A tradition holds that the laws in this week's Torah portion were given to the 70 representatives that Moses chose on his father-in-law, Jethro, Yitro's suggestion, to judge the more minor everyday issues and disputes that arose among the people. Furthermore, some traditions identify these 70 with the 70 elders of Israel, who ascend Mount Sinai partway with Moses and who experience a vision of the presence of God there. From the beginning then, wise judgment based upon sound law has had the highest value in Jewish society. Perhaps our humble origins made this receptiveness to the centrality of law possible. In a midrash on this week's Torah portion, it points out that in the affairs of this world, the strong individual does not want to conduct their affairs in accordance with law. Rather, that individual transgresses the law, destroying and robbing, favoring those he loves and his relatives, and acting in breach of the law toward those he hates. Such is the natural way of things, what Thomas Hobbes would call the war of all against all. Surely the desperation of life in slavery must have seemed like this to the Israelites. They would have been keenly aware of the evils of tyranny of the strong. Having just freed the Israelites from centuries of Egyptian bondage, and having spent 7 weeks bringing them to Mount Sinai and preparing them for this moment of divine revelation, God perceived that they would never be more ready than now to break with their past and take a path that was totally new. They would recognize God, not a human king, as the source of law, and consider living in accordance with God's law not to be just an option, but a divine imperative. The people themselves expressed their eagerness to build such a society, saying first, all the things that the Lord has commanded, we will do. And then with even more enthusiasm, they say, all that the Lord has spoken, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will faithfully do, or literally, we will do and we will hear. Great commentator Sfat Emet notes in conjunction with this Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will hear, was not just a one-time undertaking. Rather, the more we bring our behavior into line with God's commandments, the better we are able to understand what God wants of us. And the more in God's eyes, we will merit to be a holy people unto God. This then is the essence of this covenant at Sinai. God reveals the divine essence through revealing a way of life, and a people embrace that way of life and begin to live it. A code of law upon a page or upon a stela, as was common in those days, might fascinate with its possibilities or even overwhelm with its detail and welter of penalties. But law cannot gain substance until a people agrees to live by it. In that way, with their declaration of Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will hear. The Israelites at Sinai brought the divine into the world of humanity. The very next subject, in fact, that the Torah takes up after this is the collection of donations from all of the Israelites to build the Mishkan, the portable tabernacle or temple in the wilderness. As God tells Moses in next week's portion, Asuli mikdash v'shechanti betocham, let them make me a sanctuary that I might dwell among them. I pray that we always find God amongst us and we cling and embrace the laws that God has given us. Shabbat Shalom.